All right, so this next section is a continuation of what we were learning at the last video, where we were talking about the types of solutions that we had. So if we were to use the quadratic formula, and using the quadratic formula we got an answer of the square root of negative 16, all that we could do so far is to say that this will give us two complex solutions, but we couldn't actually solve anything for it just yet. All right, but that's what we're going to learn today. All right, so today we're going to discuss imaginary numbers or an imaginary unit. So an imaginary unit is denoted by the letter I, and it's the complex number whose square is negative 1. So that means I squared is equal to negative 1. And if we wanted to solve for what I is equal to, we take the square root of each side, so that means I is equal to the square root of negative 1. All right, so I is equal to the square root of negative 1, and I squared is equal to negative 1. So if we take this problem here and we want to solve for what this is equal to, we can now continue this because of complex numbers or imaginary numbers. So we can take the square root of negative 16. And the way that I want you to do this is rewrite it as negative 1 times this 16. So we're separating the negative from the number. And now, remember, we can separate these into two separate radicals. So it's the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. And what is the square root of negative 1? Well, we know that the square root of negative 1 is equal to I now with imaginary numbers. So this is I, and the square root of 16 is 4. So we would write this as 4I. So now something that we could not solve in the last section, we can now using complex or imaginary numbers. So just like we wrote here, or that we have here, the square root of negative a is equal to negative 1 times the square root, or negative 1 times a. And then we separate the negative 1 from the square root of a, and then we find, now we know the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. All right, so for this example, since we can't take the square root of 5, the square root of negative 1 will give us I, so that's how we leave it as I times the square root of 5. All right? All right, so we're just going to do one more example, simplifying or finding the square root of negative 18. All right? Unlike the last example where sometimes the square root will give us a perfect square, this example, it does not. All right, so we will just simplify this like we would a regular radical, but before we get started, we're first going to take out the negative sign. So we're first going to make this to an imaginary unit I. All right, so we would then rewrite this as negative 1 times 18. And then we break these apart, so it's negative square root of negative 1 times the square root of 18. And as we just learned, I squared is equal to negative 1, and I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So that means the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So it's I times the square root of 18. All right, just like we have done before with radicals, we want to simplify this radical as much as we can. So then we look to simplify the square root of 18. All right, so then when we're simplifying the square root of 18, we look to see which perfect squares divide evenly into 18. And 9 is a perfect square that divides evenly into it twice. So then we will rewrite the square root of 18 as 9 times 2. And then we break these apart just like we did with our radicals. So it becomes I times the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. The square root of 9 is 3, so it's I times 3 times the square root of 2. And then the last step that we'll have to do is you just have to write this. We times 3 times I, which gives me 3I times the square root of 2. All right, that is your final answer. Now, in this section, there's going to be like 7 videos that we're going to have. I'm going to try and keep these as short as possible. But this one is just a basic imaginary numbers. So it's I squared is equal to negative 1, and I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So problems that we could not do before, we can now continue on. All right, that's it for this video.